Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic Ed Monk designed wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, whom the boat is named after. All the while fixing it up for some pretty ambitious cruising, which I'm getting closer and closer to, at least the beginning of the ambitious cruising. Anyway, if that's the kind of thing that you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. So the last couple of days have been fun-filled. Well, we got lots done. Hull is pretty much ready for paint. Boot stripe is on. We launched Lloyd 2 days ago, and he's gone, and the boat is running perfectly. He's up in Maple Bay, waiting for me to join him next week. Fingers crossed. Anyway, one of the most significant things is I've done some design work, and I have come up with two fantastic strategies. One, a way to mount the tanks, and I'm really happy about that, and two, a way to deal with the gaping garboard. But we don't actually deal with that in these episodes, but because it's now and that was before, the timeline is all messed up, but I already told you. Anyway, let's jump back in time and do what I did so far. Okay, back inside, all the floors are in and fastened, and I have to concede I have lost the battle with keeping the planks swelled. So I have a plan, which I'm going to go into. I've had an awful lot of advice and some very kind offers to help, but I think I know what I'm going to do, and we'll go into it a little bit. So I have 3 more butt blocks to do, 2 very easy ones, very easy type, and one that's a little more complicated, and then I can put the engine beds back in. Okay, getting ready to launch Lloyd's boat. How about that transom, Lloyd? All right, man, congratulations. Thank you, Peter. Absolutely fantastic. Scott, you're the man. Get aboard, go, have a great trip. Awesome. Okay, so they're gonna splash and go right up to Maple Bay. We'll all join them in a week, right? Right. I'm not sure you can hear me, but the boat's been in the water for 15 minutes. Ran the pump once manually and just a little squirted out. So she's holding water nicely. The engine started. Water's coming through the coolant. Raw water strainer's working great. They're going. Gosh, I love that boat. Okay, well that was all very well. Time to get back to work. All right, and on goes the boot stripe. Nice blackness. Well, good morning. Today has been mostly a procurement trip. Been driving all over town getting some things I'll show you soon, but now it's sanding, and back to sanding out all the little seams that I put 291 in. 291 is excellent in the seams, but I can't leave any on the surface of the hull because paint, I just don't think it's paintable, but I'd rather it was only a tiny crack rather than a patch of it. I haven't shown you, it's pretty dull. I sand, but what I am doing, as you can see from here, I'm also sanding the rub rail and the splash rail, which I wasn't planning on doing, so that's a bit of a perk. right, well, let's save you the boring details. I have sanded all the fairing off. I've also sanded the rub rails, I think I mentioned. Holy moly, that was a bit of work, and it's hot. Thank gosh I finished this side in the shade. Okay, so now brush off everything. I'm stumbling. Brush off everything and spot prime all the spots that need it, and wait for that to dry and establish the boot stripe. I'm caulking Oakham now. This has actually been a great experience. This seam is really wide and not very tapered. In other words, there's not much back to it. In other words, I could stick this right through into the inside. Anyway, but Oakham is thicker, heavier, and a bit waxy, so it grips a little better, unlike cotton. So it actually solves this problem completely. It's a little harder to work with, but when you have problems of this magnitude, it's nice to be able to have a product that does it. I'll show you what it looks like. Basically, it comes on a roll. This is Scott's, the shipwrights, and I don't want to use too much of it because, gosh knows, isn't that a beautiful thing? I don't know even where you get it, but he had it, and hopefully it is available because it has saved my skin here. Now, some proper shipwrights out there are probably going to say, well, you're supposed to use Oakham completely differently than cotton, and I bet you are, but I haven't got time to figure that out. I got to get this caulked. Okay, I was debating even showing you this, and I do not want to disparage this boat or its owner, but I think sometimes it's worth mentioning when something this horrific happens simply as an accident. This boat has been owned by the same family for 44 years and immaculately maintained. It only takes one mistake, 1 minute, to turn a family legacy yacht into salvage. Be careful. I'm terrified of the prospect of running aground. I imagine I will never ever do it. God forbid I do, because it's the end. Be safe out there. Depth sounders, navigation. All right, now, so in the intro I mentioned I've been out procuring stuff, and I have come up with a plan to secure the fuel tanks. Now, I pretty much knew what I was going to do. These massive 3x3 by 1/4 inch aluminum angles will be bolted to the sides of the engine beds, which will take the inboard, much heavier side of the fuel tanks, and therefore take probably 60 to 70% of the weight of the tanks transferred straight to the engine beds. I'm really reticent, especially knowing what the bottom of the boat was like, although it's much improved now, to let too much of the weight of the tanks actually rest on the frames of the boat. Whereas the engine beds can spread that load so far, and sort of the mass of it and the structure of it, I think it's a good idea to carry most of the weight there. Otherwise, this big 1.5-inch Sapele will be ripped into 4-inch strips to create 2x4s for a new stringer that's going to go through the bilge, a bilge stringer, and that will also run the full length of the wheelhouse and add a lot of stiffening between the frames just up from the floors. I'll show you all, and that will carry the center of the tanks, and then another new stringer right on the outside edge will carry the upper, very thin. You really need a drawing, I understand. I got a plan, and on top of that, I don't want to put the aluminum tanks obviously straight on aluminum, or definitely straight on wood. The big concern, and I've done quite a bit of research, is that the tanks are fine. They self-protect against corrosion by oxidizing, but they mustn't have moisture trapped in, especially against wood, which was what killed the previous tanks. So some people would lay them in rubber, but some people have said that even rubber is a problem because condensation builds up between the rubber and the tank, and you basically have the same problem with pit corrosion. Some people say bond the rubber to the tank, which I can do, but I think I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to make, out of my high density molecular weight plastic, basically grates, ventilated grates. I'm going to route slots in it so that the tanks are only supported by hundreds of 1/4-inch strips where there's ventilation between on the plastic, and I think that is an excellent solution to make sure that the tanks don't corrode. Now I should mention I had a very generous, very generous offer from a local powder coating company to completely powder coat the tanks, and for the longest time I thought, yeah, that'll be great, but doing some research, I've discovered that that's probably a very bad idea for aluminum tanks, so I'm not going to take advantage of that. So I'm hoping this will work out well. Got a few other toys, obviously fuel fill hoses. This aluminum channel is going to be used for creating the engine box. Anyway, more on that later. And a box of other goodies, including, as I said in the short yesterday, a new sender and all the stuff for the fuel system. Fuel is a big thing. Now, the other big thing, of course, is the garboard seam. I won't go into it in too much detail right now, but I have come up with what I'm going to do. I think, as I mentioned, I've conceded that the planks are not going to swell back up. In fact, now I have to challenge my understanding that they ever were a tight seam, because remember the bilge was full of concrete, and so between reefing out the bottom and knocking out the concrete, I may just have lost track of how big that seam was. Quite the shipwright. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is clean up the inboard edge. In other words, this edge, well, let's go to a wide spot, this edge of the garboard plank. I'm going to clean that up with some specialized tools that I've procured so that it's a nice clean edge, and I'm actually going to glue, epoxy, a little fillet, a little strip of a new yellow cedar against that to extend the plank to the width it should be and create a new excellent caulking joint seam against the keel. This is not a spline that some people have recommended. In other words, I'm not going to epoxy it to both the keel and the plank. I think there's too much movement in this area to make a hard joint there. I think that would crack and fail, and then I'd be in trouble. All I'm doing really is restoring the plank to its proper width, and I think that's going to work out great, but we'll see. All right then, the bulkhead reality is becoming a little less relevant. Either that or I need to rearrange it for the remaining days, because these were generalized tasks, and now I've got it figured out pretty much what I'm doing every day, almost every hour. But just for today, I'm going to say we have to take off 2 post-its, right? So make, fasten floors, done. Caulking is 70% done. Paying is 50% done. So I'm going to comfortably remove caulking, and those are the 5 remaining days. Which aren't exactly going to happen in this order, but I'll give you a proper update on that when I figure it all out and correct the bulkhead of reality to the bulkhead of absoluteness. See you tomorrow.